Call the council meeting to order at 6:01. We respect and recognize the First Nations within whose unceded lands the village of Kaslo is situated, including the Tanaha, Tonaites, and the Silks people, and the Indigenous and Native residents of our community. So can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended to include the review of street signs and road markings, which will be 8.1 on our agenda? Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Lang. Discussion? All those in favor? And a motion to adopt the minutes of the August 13th meeting if there are no errors or omissions. By Councillor Leafwood, seconded by Councillor Brown. Discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. And we have a delegation this evening. Corporal Venema, welcome to council.
Thank you.
So we got the report. Is there anything that you wanted to highlight? And I know a couple of questions.
I'll be perfectly honest and candid. I read the report. I went on vacation, and then for about 2 weeks we had fires and
Right.
jazz fest. Nothing really stood out to me. Yeah. If you have any questions or concerns that I could probably speak to.
No, did council have any questions regarding the report that was provided? Councillor Leafwood.
Just a general question. I can't remember if I asked you this last time. Are there any kind of restorative justice programs for youth?
There isn't an actual, you did ask me last time,
Okay.
no, there isn't. We try to do our own surveys for justice. We did have one vendor that we worked with informally,
Right.
and with his parents, and came to a resolution, but now I see his name coming up again.
Right.
But this is the young ones too. So.
Okay, thanks. I won't have to get them.
No.
Great. Any other questions? Councillor Lang.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm just curious, how was Jazz Fest weekend? Was it about?
From a policing perspective, it was, a great weekend. I was able, can't believe I squeezed guys out of Kelowna to come work over. I should say, guys and gals coming out of Kelowna, coming help us out, and they were really impressed, and I think I'll have an easy time recruiting tickets. What happened last Jazz Fest? Kevin's here from. It's a good way to introduce them to the community, and yeah, I mean, the last night with the thunderstorms and everything kind of hampered things, but normally the last night isn't the issue. It's usually the first 2 nights that are the issue. They were a non-issue, so. We did have a little bit of course, the usual, the camping on the streets, and there was a couple of mental health files that flared up in the middle of that. Plus, we had some issues at the road check at the evacuation and agenda. So the additional resources were really appreciated. So.
And further to our conversation that we had before you went on vacation, we have submitted a request for a meeting at UBCM to reiterate our request for a fourth member. So we have we heard since we spoke last? No.
And I did some on my side as well, and sort of explained some of the history.
Yeah.
There's a certain business there that sort of used to be more of a fisherman's resort. It's transitioned to something else, additional resources are needed for that, and how we could work through that. So yeah, well, hopefully there's some positive results. I won't hold my breath, but
Yeah. Well, I did speak to the director for Area D and Area E, and if the time works for them, they'll both be in attendance. So we'll have all three of the affected areas that will be there. So maybe that would help.
yeah, and my chief superintendent, I'm a corporal up there,
Right.
a few ranks between us.
Yeah.
And we've been in contact with regards to the advocate for it. And here's what I'm telling you to do it. Also, the issue came up with the boundary change too. So one or both would be great. So,
All right, Councillor Lee.
To the chair. In the event of an evacuation like we had, is there like part of the plan, is there a police plan for more police to come in those situations or?
there certainly is, and there's resources that were offered to me, there's resources that I took, and there were resources that I felt would be better placed in other areas, so, sort of a balancing act, we're super short, and, I recognize there was areas in more need. I took what I needed, and then when I realized I didn't need as much as I may have taken, I gave some guys back. So,
Oh, great.
yeah. Yeah, it was, quickly, got, like, some of the things, like manual road checks and stuff that Jared's introduced, like, was great working with EOS, Sarah and Nelson. They said, hey, we're bringing a tax when we're not manning roadblock for 14 days.
No,
So you need to hire some security, and within 36 hours, they had a team private security come get their own road check.
oh, great.
That being said, we did have this system on a number of occasions. There's a few people that, didn't want to comply with that.
Right.
Evacuations.
Right.
And even those, we found reasonable solutions, other than one fellow that was clearly too intoxicated to negotiate with. So, but
We used other negotiations.
we gave them 12 hours to,
Right.
and then we
Yeah.
were able to come to terms.
Any other questions from council? The other thing that came up was the speed limit signs, just going up and down the Kaslo Hill by the golf course, and how people regularly exceed the speed limit, and I've been asked to advocate. I don't even know whether I told staff or, oh no, it was at a meeting we were at the other day, that it maybe shouldn't be, go up to 60 until we hit the top of the hill, because you've got there's two contradictory signs, one that says you can go 60, and but people, and then you can go to pass, right? So people automatically think, you're gonna speed up to pass, so they maybe go too fast, and when you're coming in and out of the golf course, either,
Well, I personally had a close call from the base hardware there with the curve on the road, and
Yeah.
somebody, I was off, and somebody that was going far more than 60, and so I saw them at the last second, and they were just, it would have been a T-bone.
Right.
So, I would like to actually see even flashing at the top of the hill, and also, like, if they could put the 80 out of view, because people even, I don't know if they got really good eyesight or what, but there's an 80 sign there, I can see it, so I must be able to go 80 here. And really, with all the stuff coming in and out of those businesses,
Yeah.
80 is ridiculous, and even 60s.
so maybe we can have a follow-up conversation, with staff and see whether we could advocate with the ministry to get signage changed. I don't know what else, we can do, but if it's a concern, because there are
If
young
you need
people.
a letter of endorsement stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I can speak personally to that.
Right.
Yeah, I would see that.
Perfect.
We do a lot of traffic control there. I'm sure you've seen our trucks at
Yeah.
the bottom of the hill and at the top of the hill. So, and I actually had a 115 and a 60 there, so. Which is a speed that can definitely cause a lot of damage. People not expecting that speed.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Well, I think we've asked you more questions this week than we ever have, so we appreciate you coming.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Yep, you too. So we'll move into our information items. I've submitted a report along with a copy of the write-up that was done for the Citizen of the Year presentation. And thank you to all of council for the part they played in helping put that together, and for all of the other bodies, the staff that helped, and Jesse was there along with Aaron. So, and I think that was well received, even though it was not a great day, but we had some good entertainment, which people thoroughly enjoyed, and the rain did let up. What's that? Yeah, that's right.
That was great.
And the little, the candles that we got, big shout out to, Honey Candles for donating those to us for our 131st birthday. They came and personally delivered them, which was nice. Yeah, there were just a lot of people that pulled together, and congratulations to David and Stephanie. They well-deserved honor for them. Are there any questions on my report? Councilor Bird.
Yes, through the chair. I noticed in your report that you noted through in your role as RDCK representative for the village, that there was an award of a contract to complete a regional growth management planning analysis project.
Yes.
So just to note, this is the very first time that there's been a cross-jurisdictional planning exercise that has been undertaken, something that I've for like 10 years have thought long overdue. So I'm really in favor of this regional growth analysis planning project. But so I noticed that in the call for proposal, the RFP states, for instance, to finalize the study area, which includes the entire region with a focus on the fringe areas between municipalities and rural areas. This is something we've talked about at council a long time, that we need to have some way of working together with the RDCK on our fringe areas. And also that the three main focus areas of this growth planning study were housing, transportation, daily needs, well, I guess that's four, and infrastructure. So this is all great, but I do have a concern is how the contractor will engage with the partners. We are a partner. And if we will get input into the engagement strategy. We've seen certain failures in the last year about somehow the engagement. I'm thinking of the sustainability plan. Is that what it was called? The RDCK, right?
Yeah.
That one. So I really think elected officials need to have a say in the engagement strategy instead of it solely being the responsibility of the contractor. I went to the provincial website about growth strategies and how they should be prepared. And here's another concern of mine. That their recommendation, this is provincial recommendation, is that these kind of planning exercises get done by staff of the partners, and that they get written and then they get presented to council for review. I really think elected officials need to go get involved and be engaged in the process before it gets to a point where it's a draft and we're reviewing it. So if there's a chance for you, and if you feel the same way, to get that message across, and if I'm not just the only one thinking like this, but in terms of engagement and in terms of content, what concerns us, I think elected officials need to have a say in that as well before it gets to a draft.
All right, I believe that they've already been in touch with yourself, haven't they, regarding that project?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll let you, can you speak to that at all? Because I did not hear there being a mechanism for local government, the elected officials to be involved. It has tended to be, like you said, staff to staff and or consultant to staff. But I do agree with you that there should be some elected official, because we're the ones who we're more in touch with all, with the broader spectrum, right? Staff interacts with a certain number or segment of the population, but we as a group have farther reach and more knowledge of the community and the dynamics of the community.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. So, do you have any comment? Or was that part, is that gonna be part of your report?
No,
Okay.
what's going to be part of my report, but what I can do is reach out to RDCK and express council's interest to be involved and come back to council with a response for the next council meeting.
That would be good. Does not follow up.
Supplemental,
Yep.
just that, an effective public engagement in the early process, but certainly with elected officials, so we're accountable. And the only way that a planning exercise will be useful is if it's also accountable, like people can see that there was a process that they were able to engage in, and engaging through us is one way for sure. And direct engagement is another, but if it's staff to staff, people don't feel like there's the same accountability, like you can be more confident of your plan being, that the process was acceptable.
I sometimes feel that we get myself into trouble because I push for that kind of thing, right? We've had a few things come to our table that originate as a rural focused item, and they come to the table with, you know, referencing communities, and I haven't seen anything come across our table because a lot of it is developed by staff and then it comes to the board table. And so I've pushed back, and I fortunately had sufficient support from the rest of the board, or enough of the board to be able to engage with our communities. So it has worked, and when you're dealing with a consultant like that, that's a little different, but when it's a staff-led thing, we can have more input, and I'm not sure, you know, I get that package 3-4 days before the meeting, so had no lead time to find it much out. So I appreciate you raising that, and CO Baker for reaching out to our CK staff to see that we can be involved in some fashion. Hopefully we can be. They might say no if they don't want to engage with everybody, but it would be worthwhile for sure. All right, and I'll go around. Councillor Leaford, do you have a report?
Just, we're hoping to open the UV early this year for the first time ever. Instead of after Thanksgiving, we're gonna try and open it October 1st and maybe go a little bit later. So we'll see how that goes.
Yep, the chair, a couple of items, and, you know, just stop me if you think I shouldn't, these are items that I technically am acting as a private person, but I think it's in village interest and local interest. And just to let people know that I have submitted an application for a fire smart neighborhood for the downtown core. And there's got a committee of 3. And I also wrote a letter to UBCM, was looking for topics for their small town forum. So I did submit an agenda item, and that was concerning the fact that residential properties are get to enjoy rebates for fixing up, fire smarting the property, and yet businesses don't. Sort of making the point that we have a lot of what used to be called essential services during COVID, and that there's critical infrastructure which gets protected. There's residences that get rebates and help to fire smart their property, but there are a number of businesses without which this town would fall. It just wouldn't exist. You can't live without a pharmacy, and back then it was the liquor store was an essential service, but you know what so I would like that this sort of idea gets raised that that should be a little more help for communities. CBT, for instance, will offer training and equipment for downtown cores, but they don't actually specifically have any rebate plans for private businesses. So just to let you know, I haven't heard back. It may not come to anything, but I'm gonna keep pushing on that one. Not as a counselor.
But actually, I would say if in the future, if you wanted to bring that, that would have been something that I think the council would have supported getting behind that personal letter because it's the community.
I did, earlier, a
Yeah.
couple of months ago, I put this just for staff consideration.
Yeah, and I just wanted to let everybody know, we submitted the request to the BBC and the CRI staff about that topic. And I have a meeting date and time, which I will forward to everybody.
Okay. One other little short item, I did attend that, Kootenai Resilience Festival, which had a focus on housing. I only got the second half because I was working. And, it was, part that I saw was concerned with innovation about building, so really had no, nothing to report to council about thoughts that are out there as far as creating affordable housing in Kaslo that council can do anything about. That's me.
Yes, you want to close that door a bit so you can actually.
See ya.
There, that's better. But everybody can see everybody. Councillor Lamb.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Lamb.
Nothing at this time.
All right. Thank you. So, and committee minutes, we have got the library building committee minutes, and there is, you'll see there is a recommendation in there. But there wasn't time, it was received too late in order for staff to get a proper staff report prepared for this meeting, because it was received on Thursday, deadline was Tuesday. So it will be on the agenda, but I think the library group would like a sense, if council is feeling that they no longer want to support the library, because there's some steps that they want to take, because there's a tight timeline on this application and a lot of work to do. So if there seems to be the intent from council that they no longer support a library, they'd rather know sooner than later before they start to invest more funds into upgrading their quotes and whatnot for submission. Because it'll be significant time that will be invested both by the library board and it will require some staff time because it will be a village application. So it will be formally on the next agenda for consideration. So I don't know what else I can say besides that.
If there are any objections, to let us know as soon as possible.
Yeah. All right, and CEO reports.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. UBCM convention, September 16th to 20th. Meeting requests for Fire Smart and RCMP staffing levels have been submitted, and as indicated, we have confirmation for the Fire Smart meeting. We need to hear back on the RCMP meeting. With respect to finance, staff have drafted a purchasing policy and are reviewing it internally with the goal of bringing it forward to council for your September 10th meeting. Legal matters, the boat club and the village have negotiated the general terms, and then staff sought legal advice about the length of the term. So we have a mortgage lease with the province through 2036. Does that mean we can have a lease of that extent with the clubs? And we received a response that yes, it's possible. And so staff are now going back to the agreement and refining words, and we'll reach out to the boat clubs in September and hopefully get that finalized and brought back to council. If not for September 10th, then the first meeting in October. Thrift store, there's also a lease agreement that one expired at the end of April, and staff are working through the details, should have something for council for the September 10th council meeting. With respect to personnel, our deputy treasurer has been hired. Their start date was August 15th, and an accounting assistant was also hired. Their start date was August 19th. So those positions effectively replace our deputy clerk treasurer that retired, and the new deputy treasurer is our former accounts clerk. Land administration, we have a staff report coming forward at this meeting for the RV park. Engineering and public works. The village has received reports of bears in the community, and some residents are concerned about the fruit trees and them being an attractant. So to let council know what staff do, any properties that aren't following these bear aware practices that are reported to us, we send a letter to the property owner and ask for their voluntary compliance. And that's about the extent of our bylaw enforcement. So in case you get asked about it or would like to change that direction, letting you know what staff currently do. Traffic safety, there's a staff report for council for this meeting. Parks administration, the Kaslo Baseball Softball Association has sent back to the village a signed agreement. So that means we've invoiced KBSA now for the 2024 season, and we'll determine what the rates for the 2025 season will be once we know the extent of their season, how many months they require the park for. There's also ballpark improvements. Those are scheduled to begin in September. There's fencing that's arrived and is at the Public Works yard. So the plan is after Labor Day, staff to start installation of the fencing. And in preparation for that, staff will meet with KBSA to make sure we know who's doing what as far as the project. Capital projects, we have our active transportation network plan. So that's walking, biking, and anything that rolls. Phase 1 is complete, which means we've received a draft memorandum which analyzes what we currently have. So phase 1, what we currently have, it's done. We've got it. We have a draft report back, and now we'll be proceeding to phase 2, which would be public engagement, and then phase 3 will ultimately be developing the recommendations and finalizing a report for council's review. The Kaslo Arena, there's been a RFP, request for proposals, that was issued and closes August 30th. And then the kitchen design and costing is in progress. Also, the generator and accessibility issues are under review right now. City Hall, we had an RFP for painting, and that closes August 30th. So I expect at the next council meeting, we'll be looking to award that contract. Front Street Park, contract was awarded, and delays in starting were experienced because of the contractor being pulled towards the fires at the north end of the lake. So it looks like before the end of the third quarter, they'll have materials and start construction. The Kemble building, there was an RFP issued that also closes August 30th. That was for the mechanical works. Sprinklers, that has an RFP that's been issued, which closes September 13th. So you'll probably see awarding that contract at the start of October. And then structural, architectural, electrical designs are still in progress. So the Kemble building project, the goal was to have it completed by the end of 2024, but it's looking like it's going to be pushing till the end of our grant agreement, which is the end of March 2025. Water treatment plant, there was an RFP for the ultraviolet treatment equipment that closed on August 23rd. So you'll see a staff report at your next council meeting. Pressure reducing valves. So we have a water supply system, and there's pressure reducing valves that are installed along the piping, which help control the pressure that's in the line. And that RFP closes September 13th. So you'll see that one in October as well. Kaslo South, that's an RFP for a development plan, and the goal is to have that issued in the third quarter. And if we're lucky, get it completed before year end, maybe into the winter, early spring of 2025. And that is my CAO report. Thank you, Mayor Healy.
Thank you. We're gonna have a busy first meeting in October by this time. Are there any questions? So I think Councillor Bird first, then Councillor Weaver.
Through the chair. I was at the playground the other day and there's the teeter totter is starting to fall apart with some sharp nails sticking out of it. And so occurred to me and that, what is our schedule for examining the playground equipment down at the Vivian Park? Is there some kind of a routine, like every month it gets checked or?
So there's absolutely standards that the village is supposed to follow with respect to playground inspections. And generally speaking, there's a monthly visual inspection that would be performed, and then there's a more comprehensive annual inspection that's required. So I can't comment on if the village is up to date with its inspections, but I can comment anecdotally speaking, it's supposed to be inspected monthly and then annually.
Councillor Weaver.
To the chair, I've got a couple of questions. The lease with the thrift store, are you looking into the longer term with that? Okay. And for the fruit trees, there used to be a program, I think it was community services, a fruit tree program. So, you know, we should maybe check and see if that's still going, and we could maybe connect people that are like property owners that we're sending letters to. I think they will come and pick the fruit for them. Right. And then the last thing is, the RFP for the arena, was that for the HVAC ventilation? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a call from someone from the province asking about the arena as an emergency center for communities. But when I told them there was no HVAC system, they said, well, you can't use it then, so. Which I thought was interesting. Anyway.
And I think that was the impetus for that, the whole project was to make it more usable for that purpose. Any further questions? Councillor Brett?
To the chair, just to support the Kaslo fruit tree project, I think it was through Bearware. So it might be wild safe coordinator, or we used to have a Bearware coordinator, Jillian.
Right.
She also did the fruit tree project. So that might be people to reach out to. Because even if there isn't something currently, I know it's something that was really well used. There were a lot of people picking and it was very effective. So I can see that would be a good step after the letter.
I think folks from Bearware might have contacted us.
Yeah, so the Bear Smart Working Group is independent from Wild Safe, and they are interested in this. And so we met with them at the start of the season and with the RCMP to talk about what the village's rules and regulations are, what our capacity to provide law enforcement is. So they are paying attention. I don't believe that there is a active harvest share type of program right now, but I do have them as a resource that they may be able to independently find somebody to assist people. Like if they are bringing me complaints, they're likely aware of the problem. And I think they're taking that upon themselves to monitor that. But speaking with one resident today, there are definitely bears in downtown Kaslo on back porches and stuff in the last few days. So it is a concern. We did put, we replaced the banner on our website. And so it now is reminding residents to pick up their fallen fruit and remind them that there are bears in the area.
Three of us were talking about the same thing. And in the correspondence, is there an option, or do you put in there that if you wish us to connect you with somebody who might be able to help, we can give you a name if they're willing to do that? Like,
We don't have any names.
Okay,
There's not a group that is running that program.
okay, so they're just bringing awareness
Yeah.
to the
There's not
issue.
working,
Okay,
does not want to,
be contacted.
they don't want to harvest fruit trees.
Right, okay.
That's not their, and I think that there may be some appetite for it, but not necessarily the capacity to serve all of Kaslo. So I think that they may be able to, make some connections between community members, just because it's a small town and lots of people know each other. But in terms of a formal program that we could direct people to, there is nothing at this point that I'm aware of. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And my other question was regarding the active transportation, the public engagement. Do we know how that's going to roll out? Like, will there be public meetings? Will it be just reaching out to specific user, like, groups that are organized, such as courts and other ones that are in that kind of field? Or will there be some sort of survey that the general public can provide input?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that the consultants did request a list of community organizations at the beginning of the outset of the project, and so that was provided to them. But beyond that, I don't know. I think it's something that we can certainly ask the consultants and refer back to council about what that plan is.
And will the consultant engage with council, or will we just get the report? We don't know.
I don't want to misspeak. I believe there was a piece of an engagement piece from council. I don't want to misspeak. So I'll find out the details of the process and report back to council at the next meeting.
All right. Thank you very much. Did you have another question?
No, through the chair, just to comment about the active transportation. I know that the hospital really hasn't been contacted about that, and that was one of the things on the list, or organization, and they have been wondering about that. Like, the committee's been wondering about whether or not we're gonna actually get contact, because we are having a conference at the end of September, and the theme is accessibility, so someone was asking me the other day about that plan, if we were gonna get contacted, so don't know how many groups they've actually contacted yet.
Well, it sounds like it's just moving into that phase, correct?
Yeah.
That's what I understood from your report.
Phase one is complete. What do we have now? And now we're moving in draft, and now we're moving into finalizing the draft and beginning engagement.
With the draft in hand when we're engaging.
Correct.
Okay.
And I will happily pass on the hospital delivery as a stakeholder. They may not have been on the radar as one of the initial groups to talk to, so that's great. Thank you.
All right, and then we have 2 items of correspondence. We've got thank you from Maddie Isaac for the bursary, which I was able to present to her at the graduation ceremonies, and a thank you from Stephanie Judy and David Stewart for being awarded Citizen of the Year. And then we have the circulation package, with any items that council wishes to pull for individual discussion, and if you want to take an action, you'll have to make a motion to put it into the business section. If not, then it's just deemed to be received, and then we'll go into question period. Are there any questions from the public or the press? Rachel, do you have any questions at this point?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, and you'll get your chance to talk soon, so you. All right, so we will move into business then. 7.1, municipal tax exemption bylaw. So I'll let corporate officer Alloway speak to that.
Thank you. So there is a draft bylaw that's in front of you. There is one update that I wanted to pass along. I think you may have noticed that in both the staff report and on the bylaw, there is some items that were highlighted because I was waiting for some additional information from BC Assessment Authority, specifically about how the regional district owned fire hall would be treated. In the past, the village has provided a permissive tax exemption for that property. But after getting some feedback from BC Assessment Authority, that's not necessary. That property is eligible for a statutory exemption under section 391(1)(a) of the Local Government Act. So there's no need for the village to provide a permissive tax exemption. So I would say that at this point, you can proceed with first reading of the bylaw as presented, but when it comes back for second reading, those items will be, that line will be removed from the bylaw, and I'll update the staff report to reflect that new information that's coming in.
Any questions for the corporate officer? I do have one, for the St. Andrew's United Church. I'm just wondering if those figures are reversed for the 2024 value of the exemption and the municipal portion. It's got the 2024 exemption at 415, but the municipal at 1,040.
You're right, that looks wrong. Thank you for catching that.
What I do find very interesting, and when you look on, I think it's page 3 of the report, as to the value of our exemptions for page 4, compared to other communities in our region. Looking at our population, we're 1,049, and that 65, does that include the fire hall, or was that?
Yes, that includes the fire hall.
But it's still significant when Creston is 5 times our population, and you know, it might be $10,000 more. So we're as a community, we're very generous with our not-for-profit and arts groups and heritage assets, and I think that, you know, that's very noteworthy. And, you know, Salmo, it's 20,000 less, and they've got more population. So, you know, but it does put a burden on the rest of the tax base. And just so they do recognize that we do give that support to our organizations in town. Mr. Bird.
Through the chair, yeah, there's some things that I'm not understanding about this chart. So there's a couple of charts. What is so there's an RDCK exemption and the municipal portion. If you get just their question, a building gets a society gets a tax exemption. And normally when you pay your taxes, you have your municipal portion, and then you have, that's not all it is. So there's municipal portion is about a third of it, quarter of it, maybe. So when we, as a municipality, give an exemption, are we also acting on behalf of province and region and everything? Like, so we're refusing, they're not paying the fire service, or they're not paying the roads, like, it's more than just that they're not paying for our service.
That is correct. When the permissive tax exemption is granted, the municipality is foregoing collection of taxes on that property, but it also results in a no tax bill for the property, because the other entities on whose behalf we collect taxes, that exemption applies to everything. Now, there are some behind the scenes calculations that the various taxing authorities do have access to the assessment roll that shows what the statutory exemptions are and what the permissive tax exemptions are. And I don't know enough about how municipal finance authority calculates their taxation requisition to know how they take that into account. But the short answer is that when you exempt a property from municipal taxation, you effectively exempt them from all taxation.
And that's where it gets spread across the rest of the tax base, because they probably still want the same amount of money, but it's gotten from less
So,
people.
yeah, as long as we follow the community charter, it is in our jurisdiction to give, as long as we do. There's a line on that chart on page 3 that I don't understand at all. So we have a whole list for the property value, so the occupier name, property value, value of exemption, and the municipal portion. And then under the black line with the totals, I've got totals, permissive exemptions. This figure 8,732,400. Don't know where it comes from. I added up all of the things above it and it doesn't work.
That's not the total property value of permissive exemptions.
Well, I did add up that whole column and it was not that number.
Yeah, it's possible that I found an error. I mean, now that I've seen the error on St. Andrews, it makes me question whether there are other errors just in the way that some of the data was pulled. Because I was going back and forth on, there are a lot of ways that you can capture it, and I was running a bunch of different tables, so I will double check that before.
Okay.
it comes back.
And mostly I think I was confused because it says totals, permissive exemptions, and then it says 8,732,400.
Yeah.
But really, it should be a total of everything above.
It should be a total of everything above, and I'm just trying to get to where that all is to see what my calculation error is and whether the error is in one of the individual items or whether it's in the
Okay.
number at the bottom.
Okay.
One more?
One more, unless somebody else wants to jump.
Any other questions? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Bird.
I would like to note that Abbey Manor has applied for a permissive tax exemption. And the Housing Society has, in the purchase and sale agreement, has agreed to forego forever a permissive tax exemption. So I would like councillors to consider the rationale between affordable housing for seniors being permissive tax exemption and affordable housing for a mix of residents, some of whom are seniors, and 2 of which are accessibility suites, but are not eligible for a permissive tax exemption.
And
Just a question of fairness.
no, I think it's totally fair because I believe it's only, you're only, that Penny Lane is only getting taxed for the market rent ones because we cannot charge tax. We must give a statutory exemption to the 7 units that are subsidized.
So why is?
It's just,
Abbey
we,
Manor-
the village, if I remember correctly, in our agreement, we agreed to waive all taxes for 3 years. For 1 year after construction. It was complete.
The 1 year, 2023 was exempt,
Yeah.
2024 was not.
So I think, because if you look at the assessed value, they drop the value of the assessment to what is being charged. I'm pretty sure that that was in the agreement because we went over it quite thoroughly. And it is only being taxed for the 3 market rent because we knew we were going rent on 7 full units. It's just, no, we've got no choice because they're subsidized units. So it's just taxing the market ones and the people in Abbey Manor are subsidized. But we can certainly have that's, you have that same recollection.
Yeah, I do.
Because I'm seeing in my assessment, I'm not seeing any exemptions on the property at 334 A Avenue. But it may be something that happens before the numbers get to me.
Yeah.
So I will review the agreement, the purchase and sale agreement to see exactly what that says in there. And I'll put a little bit of language in the next staff report that explains that and gives clarity around whether that's, how that's being handled.
Okay, thanks.
Because my impression is that the value of the property is reduced rather than the rate of the taxation, but the rate for the Senior Citizen Shelter Society, their taxable portion is only $251,000, and that property is worth far more than that.
Yeah.
And I think you would find the same if you looked at the assessment that's received by Penny Lane or for Penny Lane. It's-
Unfortunately, we did not know this,
Okay,
and it's fully, it's assessed as if it's a commercial building. Nobody ever told us to go to BC assessment and say it's not a commercial building.
okay.
So it's worth
you
1.6 million,
Okay,
and that's what we're being taxed on.
okay. So then you need to go to
We do.
assessment, yeah.
You will receive your notice of assessment from BC Assessment Authority in early January. That would be
Max.
time.
You got like 30 days.
Councillor Weekwood.
Chair. I thought this was the first year that the Shelter Society applied for permission.
Yes, it is.
So what have they done previously then? Like if,
They have been fully taxed.
Put on a reduced valuation assessment because they knew something.
The government does it, right? There's no choice. The government does it.
Reduces your assessment? You didn't.
That's worth more than $1 million.
1.6.
But that's worth more than $1.6 million, that whole structure, right? It costs you,
No idea. I know it costs more than that to build it.
so it's worth more than that. So the assessment value has been dropped. Yeah.
I'll-
I'm a
I'll find
number
out.
girl, so, and I read that part of it because that was a concern that we were foregoing a bunch of taxation for the community. So did we answer your question? Councillor Brown?
Through the chair. I also, when I was somewhat surprised looking at the chart and looking at Nakusp, whose population is over 1,500, $25,000. Nelson, who has 10 times their population, is only, we're 50% of what they give. Well, I'm not against this because I feel like they're amazing organizations that are certainly deserving. But I do wonder, one of the suggestions in here, that one option is to remove the permissive tax exemption for those portions of the property that are used to generate revenue. Is that worth looking into in terms of figuring out how much would be recovered if we were to do that? I guess I'm wondering, is that like, as it's an option, would it be a fruitful information to know exactly what impact that would make? Because I would be curious if that would be substantial enough to make it worth looking at.
And I think that's why it's only a 1-year bylaw, is that gives staff the chance if we want them to look into it, because I don't think we meet all the requirements to do that before.
One of the challenges is that we don't currently have the breakdown of what portion of each of those properties is being used for commercial purposes or rent generating. So there are definitely ways that can be done. But we have to work with BC Assessment Authority to make sure that we are presenting our requests in language that allows them to apply their calculations and their formulas, so that we have to have that agreement. So I'm not able to tell you exactly what the impact would be of doing that until we advise BC Assessment Authority of what those splits would look like, and then BC Assessment Authority will then tell me what what value would belong to each of those two categories. And then I can do the calculations to tell you what the difference would be. That makes sense.
Supplemental?
That's supplemental. So would the mechanism then be to go to those organizations and ask them for that breakdown?
They don't have that breakdown, but what I'm trying to say is that BC Assessment Authority, I don't believe has calculated that breakdown. So like, and it happens frequently when, like, in a perfect world, everybody takes out a building permit for everything that they do. And then that information goes on to BC Assessment Authority. And so BC Assessment Authority has that data to know which bit of square footage is being used for which purpose. But in most jurisdictions, there are lots of changes that have happened to building use without the proper permitting. And so BC Assessment Authority, although they do their best to make sure that their assessments are reflecting the actual use of multi-use properties, they're imperfect because the information that's being given to them isn't complete. So, and it's rare that a entity appeals their property tax assessment if it would go up. Right, generally those appeals are about people who want to see their assessment reduce. And so most folks are wise to the fact that generally the business and other classification is a higher multiple than the residential classification. And so people tend to take their time advising BC Assessment Authority if they've started generating revenue from a property that was previously used for non-revenue generating purposes.
In the CAO's comments, he does mention that, and that's why it's a 1-year term, and then that allows for that mechanism for that to happen, because it can't happen for this season, because you do have the option of doing multiple years, and I think in the past we have done 3-year terms, but it's only being, the bylaws written as a 1-year term. So unless we choose to change that, so those numbers, well, that we changed or queried doesn't change the bylaw, correct? It's, or does it, can we adopt the bylaw with amendments recommended?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we can still make changes if it comes to second reading and the council's wish is to, I don't want to pick on anybody, but
Right.
if council identifies a particular property and says, we don't want to describe that portion of the property taxed, then I can quickly reach out to BC Assessment Authority, add a column in the bylaw that gives a little bit more explanation of, you know, except for the portion used for this permit series.
Is that feasible, given the timelines and with the workload that staff has to do that for this year, or just to start this process earlier, perhaps next year, and give staff time to analyze, get that analysis done?
It would be really tight to do it this year, but it's not impossible. So if it's council's will, I think that the other thing to keep in mind is that this is a departure from past practice. And so these community organizations are pretty used to getting full tax exemptions. And so one of the ideas that staff is proposing is that give them the standard permissive tax exemption again this year with a few modifications, and then put them on notice that it's likely that council, you know, once council adopts a policy, we can then forward that policy to the various community groups and say, hey, if you think that you might fall within one of these categories, be advised that you may not be eligible for a full permissive tax exemption from council going forward, and you might need to start looking at your financial planning to make sure that that's something that you can absorb.
All right, so, the recommendation then would be the permissive tax exemption bylaw 1306/2024, given a first reading as amended.
As presented, it's fine, and we'll make the changes for second reading.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Buford, seconded by Councillor Brown. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Next, UBCM, Community Resiliency Investment Funding. Did you want to come and talk to us about what you've been doing and what you're proposing for us?
Yeah.
You can come up to the table if you wish.
I'll stand.
Okay.
Feels so official up here. Thank you so much for, the time in your agenda. I'm always amazed by the depth and breadth of things that come into this room, and I just learned a lot about innocent tasks. So thank you for making space for this conversation. I know that I sent in the staff report with the agenda package, so I'll just kind of summarize it really quickly. The municipality has been accessing CRI funding since 2020 towards fire smart initiatives. We're at a place in our kind of funding cycle now where we're wrapping up the 2023 CRI funding. I included some kind of fun stats in the background about what that's funded for us. Great job getting that stuff going. I think it's really important. As we're coming to the end of 2023 CRI funding, we sort of needed to gain current to move forward and continue fire smart programming and all of the work that's happening at the municipality. So the sort of plan that I'm proposing is that we apply for 2024 CRI funding to get us through until the winter, end of December. And then at that time, put in an application for 2025 CRI funding, which will carry us through the 2 years after that. So really quick, the things that I really like about that plan is that it avoids any gap in funding. So applying for that shorter 2024 period. It allows us to continue kind of programming. It also sets us up to have more time to put together a really intentional and thoughtful funding application in 2025. I think there's a lot of debrief to be done between many agencies after the fire season, so I really like that it gives us space to incorporate that before we look towards the next 2 years. I'd also love to have, that space to have some intentional conversations in this room as well. It's great. I know that I've run into the grocery store or in other board meetings, but I'm kind of working with Robert on a plan to bring some of that conversation into this room with you folks. So there's a lot of really positive things about that plan moving forward. So yeah, I prepared the staff application and I'm asking for your thoughts.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Jesse? Will there be with this funding runs out at the end of September, the current funding that we have in hand?
So I've got the funding allocated until the middle of September for 2023 funding. Yeah. And that's where there's a conversation around the 2024 funding. Because the 2025 funding application doesn't open until October 1st. So we find ourselves with this kind of funky 2-week gap.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So that leads to my question is, will there be a gap in your being able to do work? Because while we're waiting for the 2024 application to be approved.
Totally.
Yeah.
Not with this scheme. So because we're on allocation-based funding, and so CRI recently updated some of their programming options. In the past, we've been on application-based funding, which is really rigid. Yeah, and that's the 2023 funding is application-based. So moving forward to the allocation-based, we meet certain requirements. So we're of a certain risk class in Kaslo. We have a fire smart coordinator position. We have a fire smart committee in place, and then we also have an updated CWRP. So we meet the requirements for that allocation-based funding, and as soon as that application is submitted, UBCM says that they'll return it within 30 days, but we can start billing that as soon as that application is submitted. So no gap in funding. Excellent. You get that to me.
And this next one is more of a comment.
Mhm.
Just wondered if for future fire smart public events, if council could get a little bit more heads up about the dates so that we can put that into our calendars and see if we can attend.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't affect us, it's very, I think it's beneficial if we are able to attend.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm grateful for the attendance that we have received. That's something I'm really looking forward to, and having a full-time position is some more intentional calendar and planning, and so one of the things I'd love to line up, sort of in the slower season is an event schedule for the field season, so that's not me arranging things at the last minute, kind of ASAP to get out in the community and meet those grant deliverables. So it's definitely on my radar. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you. My last one is just a quick question on, under discussion. I think it might be, well, it is a typo. So it's, where it says, for 2025 CRI funding will facilitate fire smart programming for 2 years in additional years, including, well, I think it's supposed to say 200,000, but there's a zero missing. Oh, yeah. So it's either, is it 20,000? And you just the column in the wrong spot, or is it a zero missing?
No, there's zero. And that's sort of a convoluted sentence too. I have a really hard time. This is my whole world, and sort of like accessible. Well, sometimes scrambles my brain, but another great thing about applying for that 2025 CRI funding. So there was a significant program update between 2024 and 2025. In that the program is the same in that we can access $200,000 per year for 2 years, so $400,000. But with the 2025 funding program, we can access an additional $100,000 per year for fuel modification. So we're looking at $600,000 $400,000. So,
And I guess that leads me to another one with the work that you're then doing through us for the regional district. Does that work come out of our money, or do they apply for money, and is that a contribution towards your time, or are they paying the village, or?
Yeah, how does that
That's
work?
probably more of a question for our staff, but.
Yeah, no, that's all good, good question. And this is the first year that the arrangement has been structured this way.
Yeah.
But there's a municipal services agreement, and Catherine, I know you worked extensively
Yes.
on it, so if I have any gaps, please jump in and fill them in. But essentially, we are exchanging services. So my wages are facilitated through the municipality. Thank you. And I facilitate RDC programming in the village of Kaslo and also Area D. And the exchange there is my hours for all the administration of those programs. So the RDCK administers the home assessments, they do things up back in administration. They also administer the rebate program and the Fire Smart Canada neighborhood recognition program. And the other really great thing about that agreement is that all of a sudden I'm not working all alone in the silo. I've got sort of access to folks that have been doing this for 5-7 years, and a whole team of 7-8 wildfire mitigation specialists. So we'll definitely be looking to debrief that kind of agreement at the end of the summer, and look forward to next year. But where I'm sitting, it works out really well for everybody.
Thanks. Sorry to put you on the hot seat.
No, that's great. I really appreciate it. Often I'm like having these conversations at the grocery store, or like we're at a board meeting or family functions. So I appreciate your time again. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, so the recommendation is that the village apply for UBCM's Community Resiliency Investment Program for 2024 Fire Smart Community Funding and supports in the amount of $92,131.80 as detailed in the staff report from Jessie Lay, Fire Smart Coordinator, dated August 22, 2024, titled 2024 UBCM Community Resiliency Investment Funding, and further that the village agree to the regional district of Central Kootenay managing and delivering parts of the 2024 Fire Smart program on the village's behalf as detailed in the staff report from Jessie Lane, Fire Smart coordinator. I won't read the rest. Repeating it. Moved by Councillor Leadwood, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. The motion passes. All right, water supply system conditions on operating permit. Do you want to speak to that at all, for Gail Baker?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So So what's interesting is 2017, Interior Health proposed these conditions on our operating permit. It doesn't look like they got finalized. Then there was conversation again with Interior Health and staff in 2019 and reiterated the proposed conditions, and it doesn't appear they got finalized. Recently met with staff this year, and it's not clear to me that they got finalized. There's some of these proposed conditions that continue to be put on this permit. So we have a permit, but at any point in time, Interior Health can add these conditions that we're supposed to adhere to. So I think what's confusing for me is there's proposed conditions, and that's what you see as an attachment to the staff reports, proposed conditions. But I don't have clarification about whether they've been agreed to and finalized. But notwithstanding whether they're proposed or have been finalized, there are certainly conditions that we should be adhering to that make good sense, protect our water source and have a water quality monitoring program, et cetera, et cetera. So all of it makes good sense. The good news is our manager of strategic initiatives and our public works foreman are on top of it, and they're keen to get the work accomplished. So what's not necessarily put into this report is the backlog of work that our public works foreman and all of our staff have not been able to accomplish because of turnover with public works staff, as well as turnover with management through City Hall. So now that we have a manager of strategic initiatives, our public works staff have been able to give work to the manager of strategic initiatives, saying, this is stuff we've been trying to get to, we haven't been able to get to it, can you help us? So fantastic that we have that manager in place to help us start getting on top of these things. What worries me though is that the future of what our management structure is going to look like after 2024, it hasn't been finalized yet. We still need to go through our strategic priorities in October. So heading into that and looking at the staff report, just want council to be aware that there's a backlog of work and there's benefit in having management overseeing these aspects of municipal operations to make sure they don't get lost. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the recommendation is that the village develop a drinking water protection plan for each of its water sources as required by the conditions of its operating permit, and that the village apply to the disaster resilience and innovation funding program to offset costs of developing drinking water protection plans for each of its water sources, and that the village develop a cross connection control program as required by the conditions of its operating permit. Okay, moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried.
I think this is a point of order when you think someone's uncomfortable and you want to address it. Just suddenly this is like, you lost power on your laptop, right? And you need that phone, could you use, like Councillor Lang doesn't have a laptop right now.
Oh.
And it's because we don't have enough plugs.
Oh, well, I'm fine.
So,
Okay, so, yeah.
Mine's not plugged in either because there's not enough room. What do you call it? It's like Robert's rule. Is that a point of order
Well, no, but that's more a point of privilege. If he can't participate in the meeting, yeah, it's not a point of order.
yeah.
It's where point of order is if somebody's doing something out of order, but
Yeah.
that he needs that to.
Yeah.
Thank you for.
Yeah, thank you for noticing.
Yeah.
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 Looks-
I know, like, I've
It looks to me like
But I'm hoping I don't need it.
Yeah,
And I thought the phone could be in.
yeah, no, you can definitely unplug, but are we all, everybody who needs power has power now? All right,
So far.
thank you for raising that, Councillor Bird.
thank you for taking over.
Good afternoon. That's okay.
So were you just sitting there? and-
Well, I'm just
It just happened like a minute ago.
Oh, okay,
No, it's,
okay. Yeah, definitely don't hesitate to raise those kind of things. Because we need you to be able to be fully participating and being able to see the materials. So. All right, next item, 7.4, invitation to childcare access and expansion. Before I read out the recommendation and see if anybody else is interested in attending this, I guess the question would be, what would be the outcomes? Because they're looking at, where could we put additional childcare spaces? What are the opportunities? And should we reach out to anybody else in the meantime, right? Because are we as a municipality going to say that we're going to put in childcare spaces or work with Kootenai Lake Independent School Society and see if there's any further room for them to expand? We did have an opportunity a couple of years ago presented to us, which we couldn't at that time take advantage of. And so I guess what would be the desired outcomes? I just don't want to, I could go and listen, and I'm totally happy to do that. But it would be a cost to the municipality for me to attend. And if there aren't any outcomes that the council sees coming out of it. Councillor Leaford.
I think we did recognize a couple of years ago when, and I think it was a study done by the Kootenai Lake Independent School Society, that there was a need.
Yes.
So I think it's worth going and listening to, what they have to say. And maybe there is some way that we can access funding or resources or something, but I think it's definitely something we want to participate in.
Okay. I just want to make sure before it's, I think Councillor Bird would have been interested, except for having to miss work in order to attend. Which, I'll be in the same position, but I have more flexibility to manage my time. I go in at a ridiculous hour in the morning. Councillor Bird?
Yes, through the chair, for me also, I really don't have any idea about I know there's a need, but I don't know about the potential structures that are already here. Like I don't have anything to do with periwinkle. But if they could expand, and I always figure one of the limitations is lack of ECE training staff. And maybe a conversation with Heike, just to say what she thinks the labor market, like, could it even be supported here? Might be a thing.
You look like you were going to say, did you have further, Councillor Beaver?
Yeah, I have talked to Heike. I talked to her not last year, but the year before. I think it is getting better with ECE certified personnel. They do have 2 staff down there. So I think the whole province, like in an attempt to address that, has tried to make it easier. So I think there are more people being trained for ECE.
All right. So given that, I would be willing to attend. And if council members want to read that over again, and if you have any specific asks, that if I have the opportunity, I don't have a sense as to how many people will be in attendance, but if I have the opportunity to ask questions, if you want to look at that and email me and let me know what in particular. So the recommendation is that Mayor Hewitt be authorized to attend the Ministry of Education and Child Care meeting in Nelson on September 10th, 2024, with expenses paid pursuant to municipal policy. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Leaford. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. All right, 7.5, so all parks proposal. So I will turn it over to Snail Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So I would like to pick up where we left off at our last meeting. There were some questions that council posed that staff have been able to gather information on. And if you don't mind, I'd like to fill you in on those details since our last conversation. So one of them was a question about, okay, we got these 3 different parcels, a big one and a medium one and a little one, but how big are those parcels and what's the value of each land? And so that information's been included in the staff report now, the big one being about $69,000, medium one being around 12,000, and then the little one being negligible at $1,000. And so depending on how the discussion goes with council, it might make sense to go in camera and talk about the terms to negotiate what latitude you'd like to give staff when it comes to the value of these properties, and in particular of these 3 parcels that QP Developments is looking to exchange with us. What's council's appetite for those 3? So I'd say that probably makes sense for a negotiation conversation in camera. One of the other items that was brought up was the prospect of there being camping outside of the fenced RV park and on the beach heading towards the lakefront. And so I was able to get confirmation from QP Developments that they do not intend for there to be any camping outside of their fenced area. And you know, the assurance for what it's worth is that there is this 15-meter waterfront development area from the high water mark towards their development where there can't be any disturbance. So they're trying to reassure us that they're not going to be outside of their fence. Maybe there's going to be a canoe or a kayak sitting on the outside the fence, but they're not looking to occupy it. And we had a discussion with QP Developments about concern on the waterfront where the public might not feel welcome down there. Even if the private owner says they're not looking to push the public out, you know, we kind of want some assurance that the public's not going to feel unwelcome. And so what they've offered is that there'd be an easement across the lake shore where there's a path that's covenant on title, where public are allowed to be there, and there's signs, and there's no way out of it. You can't back out, it's a legal covenant, that's it. And so in effect, what you can imagine is the public can access from the highway through the road all the way to the RV park entrance where there would be public parking. And alongside that road would be a multi-use path for biking and walking. And once you get to the RV park, that path then would shrink a bit into a trail that would continue all the way along the river to the lake shore. And then from the lake shore all the way across their RV park development would be this easement. The village would own everything along the river. That's ours. And then we would have an easement for access on the lake shore. And so the intent is that that addresses council and the public's concern that they wouldn't have access. And staff also chatted with QP Developments about, okay, that's great, wonderful, but it would be really nice if the village owned that land. There's pros and cons. And at the end of the day, where it kind of landed was if the village owns that land, we don't have the resources to control what goes on there. We might now be the ones that have the public camping on property where we don't want them, or, you know, the new yoga, etc. And so what so it might make sense for it to remain private property with the easement in favor of the village. And then it could be easier for the private property owner to control the activities that go down. If there's camping or a campfire or some other activity, they can go tell people, hey, this is private property, you can't be doing that here. But I can tell you that I genuinely believe their intent is to allow the public to occupy that area and use it just like any of their RV park users would be able to. Now, there was some questions that came out after the staff report about water availability. And certainly it came up in previous staff reports or planning reports that came before council. So I just want to confirm and let you know that the village's water supply can serve a population of about 1,500. And that information was gathered during the official community plan development. We know that in the summer, when folks are watering their lawns, that we're pushing our capacity with respect to water supply. And so when it comes to developing a RV park zone and even our other bylaw considerations, we need to put in place restrictions on sprinklering that would be allowed in the RV park. The QP Developments is aware that we're going to want to restrict it. They understand, and they've even agreed that they're not looking for there to be a whole bunch of sprinklers out. You know, this is going to be more of a, call it a rustic experience for the RV park, not a lush green Palm Springs kind of venue. So, and maybe further to that, if we're able to, well, we know we want an easement on their, across their property for this raw water line to go from the lake up to the golf course. So if the village can find the funds to put that raw water line in, then it'll reduce the amount of water that's being consumed by the golf course. They use raw water rather than treated water, and it would free up capacity for other uses within the village. So hopefully that addresses some of the concerns that have come up. Maybe one of the other ones was the tax rate adjustments. Are we going to see an increase in tax revenue with the RV park? And it depends. But the goal would be, if there's a prospect of the classification by BC assessment reducing the tax revenue that would come to the village, because it's going from commercial use or business use, excuse me, to RV park, well, then we might need to revisit our tax rates and make adjustments. Risk is that you might impact other recreational property owners that you weren't planning to impact, but you had to in order to get the funding out of the RV park that you want. So that's something that'll come up in due course. You know, October, November, as we're talking about strategic planning and then heading into budget deliberations, those are things that staff would come back to council with and ask for your direction on. It's also worth noting here that we haven't laid out every single step and consideration that we're going to need to go through. Tried to focus on what is the task at hand, which is land disposition at this point. There's going to be discussion around rezoning and then subdivision. And that's when parkland, cash in lieu, a 7-meter setback along the lake shore, or any other number of details are going to have to get worked out. But to try to lay out all the details in front of council now, one is it's simply not possible because we don't have all the answers, because the developer doesn't know every single thing that they're going to do with their property. But it's also becomes very confusing and cumbersome to try to have a discussion about it. So we're just trying to focus on the matter and land disposition. Does it seem to make sense? And that's where we're kind of led to what I might call a bit of a summary under the other considerations. It's a floodplain. It's got limited use for the private owner, and the road allowances are of limited value to the community right now. What the community's enjoying is the lake shore for the most part. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been a lot of feedback about the kind of the upland area, the rest of the sand and gravel. Some of it's road allowance, but a large chunk of it is private land. And so in order for the public to make good use of the lake shore, the river, the trespass, it's not our land. It's difficult, I think, to kind of have the public understand those kind of details. QP Developments is paying for these trails, parking spaces. It's at their cost. They're also paying for staff time up, or not staff time, any use of a consultant up to this point. So we use a lawyer to explain to us the legislative framework. And I've used a planning consultant to help give guidance on negotiations and best practices. And so those costs have been absorbed by the private property owner, and they're happy to pay for those costs. Yeah, at the end of the day, the OCP allows for zoning of an RV park. And it would even appear that the village made adjustments to its OCP in order to provide for this type of opportunity to occur. And ultimately, there's 6 council strategic priorities that can be satisfied with this type of proposal. It helps develop the economy. There's going to be adjustments that maybe small businesses need to make, but once they make those adjustments, the hope is that it brings more tourism to the community and helps benefit the village. So it's back to council to kind of decide what do you feel is in the best interest of the community based on what you've heard and all the information staff be able to provide. Thank you, Mayor Hewitt.
Thank you, CEO Baker, for following up on council's concerns. All right, any questions for CEO? Councilor Beaver?
Sure. It's not a question, it's just a clarification, mainly for the public, which there isn't really many of them on, but going into in-camera to discuss certain things. I think the public sometimes doesn't understand why we do that. And so maybe you could just, indicate that, even if it's for the minutes, why would we need to discuss that particular aspect in camera?
So certainly you can imagine even QP developments could be watching this discussion. And so if council has a strategy when it comes to, which pieces of land are you comfortable exchanging, or, we've assessed it at 52,500 per acre. Really, that doesn't mean anything other than it gives you a bit of a baseline of where the negotiation could be. You could want 100,000 per acre. You might say, you know what, we would settle for 30,000 per acre. And so that discussion probably makes good sense to have without the other party eavesdropping on what your strategy or your parameters would be. So I think that the staff report provides all of the information that council currently has. If we go in camera, there wouldn't be new information that's brought forward. It's all out here in the open with staff reports. And in fact, council's raised previous in-camera staff reports out into the open so that the public can access the same information. So the only reason to go in camera is to figure out the points of negotiation, not for new information to be discussed or raised. Does that help?
Yes, but isn't there also like normally when we go in camera, we'll say, we're going in camera due to 9.1 or whatever.
Yeah.
So there is actually
Yeah, would you like that section?
yes,
It's section 91 of the community charter, which reads, a part of the council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following. And we're relying on clause E, which says the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality.
thank you.
Any other questions or, and this is also the opportunity, if you have other items that you would like the CAO to look into with QP, if you've had, after reading the proposal, and again, the updated proposal, whether there's any further information that you feel you need to be able to make an informed decision. That doesn't stop us from making the motion as it is recommended today on the agenda, because it doesn't bind us to anything up until adoption. There's still the option to make changes. This only takes us to second reading. So, like I said, at any point up until adoption, we can make changes, but I think the public would like us to be out in the open. And so I think now is the time, if you do have any other concerns that you need the CAO to reach out to QP to satisfy, then it would be prudent to do so now. Councillor Byrd?
Through the chair, on that note, things like, the geotechnical, whether the capacity for sewerage and, certain, things that the public has, ecological considerations that the public has brought up, that's down the line. My understanding is this is not the time to elicit all those studies and that there will be, there are restrictions that will be imposed, like conditions of sale. Such, well, you don't buy a property without knowing if it's got septic capacity. So that would be my condition of purchasing your property, would be I'd like to see evidence from the health department that you have that capacity. There's certain environmental considerations that people have brought up. The water capacity of the village is one of them, but also like the environmental, negative environmental, having a whole bunch of people on a piece of land. There's poop, right? But those kinds of things, this is not the time. This is not where this is not the kind of negotiations in the purchase and sale at this time. That comes to the subdivision. When it comes to rezoning and it comes to subdivision, I'm just confirming in my own mind, this is not the time to be getting those assurances of environmental propriety. I'm not explaining myself well, but
So I understand where you go. Yeah.
Totally understand what
Yeah.
you're saying. So there's two matters here. There's the disposal of land. That's one piece. And the way that we would structure the purchase and sale agreement would be to include those conditions that we are going to apply during rezoning. And so there's already been an environmental assessment performed, and the company has outlined a number of recommendations that would need to be met in order for the environment to be protected. There's also a sewerage assessment that's been performed. All of that has been at the cost of the developer, and they already have those answers. And so when we go to rezoning, we would put a condition as part of the purchase and sale that lets the QP developments know when we do rezoning, we're going to put a covenant on title that requires you to adhere to all of the conditions of that environmental assessment report. So now is the time and to consider those things, to make sure it's clear to both parties up front, so that there's no surprises. And we are going to include it in the purchase and sale agreement.
And Councillor Brown?
So I guess I'd just like to state publicly, I do recognize that the campground is max and that we do need additional options for expanding camping and having people in Kaslo. But I personally don't believe that there's adequate public support for rezoning. And I wouldn't be voting on anything moving forward to further this project.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Byrd?
through the chair, bear in mind, I have almost zero experience with real estate. But, so my question is, with such a big transaction that is important to so many people, the resolution at hand is to ask staff to do the negotiating for such things as sale price and which pieces of the land. That's what we're considering now. Would you normally do this with a real estate professional on the team? Or, like I said, I know nothing about real estate, but it seems to be that, we're asking you to be a real estate agent.
Leo Baker?
So I don't know, I don't know if a real estate agent would be what we need, but what we need are lawyers who understand what we're entitled to and what we can require of the private property owner. And we need someone who has experience with planning. And since we don't have those expertise in-house, same with we don't have a surveyor in-house, and we don't have an appraiser in-house. And so that's why we had QP Developments pay for those professionals to provide the information from an unbiased perspective. The village staff and QP Developments have helped select the appraiser so that we know that they're working in, in an unbiased way. And then the village has gone out and found their own planner, not just one planner, but multiple planners in order to gain competing perspectives on what makes good sense from their experience seeing these types of deals in other parts of the province. Same with the appraiser, they've given competing evaluations. So you're 100% right. We don't want to be assuming the role of a real estate agent. And so we built a team of people collectively between QP Developments and then sometimes the village on its own to make sure we get the perspectives that we need. And certainly if council feels like there's another perspective that we should get before making a decision, then staff are happy to reach out and get that information that you feel is missing.
Supplemental on that one?
Yeah, I guess my curiosity is about sale price. You have an appraisal. Does that mean it's generally accepted on both parties that that's the price? Or like what kind of hardball can you play with?
Well, I think CAO Baker had addressed that earlier, and that is the portion that we will talk about in camera. And it authorizes the negotiation, but we are going to inform that how that negotiation will go once we're in camera.
I'm sorry, but it wasn't clear to me that we were necessarily going in camera, so.
There is a resolution at the end of this meeting to go in camera under that section of the charter. Yes.
Missed that on the, okay.
I've got a few questions which don't affect the resolution. First one is there any language that we could put in to ensure that the development remains seasonal?
Absolutely.
And this one's a question. The use of that property is just naturally going to be limited by it being in the floodplain, correct? There are very limited uses that the property owner, even if we had sold them the land and the RV park didn't go forward, they're limited by floodplain restrictions and our different environmental protection zones as to what they can do, right? It can't be a sawmill if they decide not to go, right? Because we're changing the zoning, but the zoning is going to be more favorable, because right now, if we sold them the land, it didn't change the zoning. They're more open to what they can do. So this is somewhat more favorable to the municipality to go to a recreational zone.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And they cannot build, because it's a floodplain, they can't build anything really anywhere unless it's above the flood level. And so in order for them to build a washroom facility, they're going to have to find an area of land or build it up that is above the floodplain. And then they're restricted on what can actually be within the floodplain. So at this point, it seems like the only thing you could have would be an RV pad. There's not, you can't build a structure on the floodplain.
Is there any possibility of council getting a tour of the site to see where everything is actually gonna lay out? Because I walked along the dike the other day and there seems to be a lot of area that is, yeah, not getting a sense as to, looking at the map is a lot different than looking at it in person. I know when we used to do, back in the days when we were first on council, council used to go for walks when we were looking at development variance permits to see on the ground and in the neighborhood what things would look like. But I think that would be beneficial for council to see what distances we're actually looking at, because that 30 meters actually might be a lot more than what we're thinking. 30 meters is 30 meters, but is it 30 meters lineal or is it, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think.
I think QP developments would love the opportunity to go to site with council and perhaps have everything staked out. If, you know, that would help. They would absolutely be here in a heartbeat.
And the other thing is, would there be any value in having another community meeting with QP presenting, and it's how that would look, because we have discussed how the last one went, and whose meeting would it be? Would it be a village meeting presenting, or, you know, is there any value in even having one? Just to increase the transparency of the project, because it seems like people, you know, we tried as best we can. It was on the agenda, and people have known for a long time that this is coming, but we don't have members of the public here, and they could have come and asked questions, but there's got to, just to try and raise that transparency. I don't know whether we're not going to satisfy everyone, but just to try and make some attempts to get the information more public.
Absolutely. I think QB developments would participate. I think they would, I can't speak for them.
Right.
But my sense is that they would probably suggest, we've already done the community engagement piece, and they've provided the feedback to council, and so they might ask the same question: what's the value in doing it again? And I can't answer that.
All right, so I'll read the recommendation. The village staff be authorized to negotiate and finalize the terms and conditions of a purchase and sale agreement with QP Developments for the exchange of land that would enable their RV park development to proceed, and that the village proceed with second reading of zoning amendment bylaw 1298. Moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Newford. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Would you like the negative vote recorded? And that motion passes. And now we have our late item, which is a review of street signs and road markings. Since we got this just before the meeting, I would appreciate if you could give us a little run through, please, CEO Baker. I know you had mentioned it before, in a couple of your staff reports, so we knew it was coming.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So reached out to ICBC because we received complaints. It started at Vinnie Park. So folks were concerned that when kids were coming out of alleyways or other roads that adjoin Ring Road, that there was risk that they were going to get hit. They'd seen some dangerous situations. And then following that, we received some complaints from neighbors in Lower Kaslo about the speed of vehicles. And, what is the speed limit here, and can we put up a sign, or could we consider, speed humps or speed bumps? And so staff chatted with ICBC and they said, we've got some funding we could allocate to the village of Kaslo to review your street signs and road markings. And not only that, but they can come to site and provide education to our staff on what street signs should look like and what are the standards that are in place in the province and across Canada, and what should the road markings look like, so that staff can do on-site inspections or condition assessments and recognize when something's not right. So at this point, when staff tour the village, we can see that sometimes street signs are of varying heights. Sometimes road markings in one area aren't consistent with where they are in another area. And our general sense is that we might not be adhering to the standards that are within the province or Canada for signs and markings. So we need some professional guidance here. And ICBC reached out to a third party that would help perform the assessment. One of them came back with a quote. It's within the estimate that ICBC have provided of $15,000. ICBC would split that cost 50-50 with the village, and then give us any road signs that need to be installed or changed out. And so it's really to the benefit of the village to participate in this kind of a program from staff's perspective. The challenge is it wasn't a part of our plan for 2024. It's something that came up based on feedback that we received from the community. Luckily, it's a low investment of $7,500 roughly, and can be absorbed within our operating budget. So staff are looking to seek council's approval to proceed and hopefully get this assessment back in time that it can become a part of budget considerations if we need to pay for the cost of installation of signs or road marking.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Wood.
Through the chair, the resolution is about awarding a contract. As you said, what about, so that's a direct award, but that's covered under our policy, procurement policy?
So it's covered under our procurement policy in that we went through a public process, trying to get more than one estimate or quote for the work to occur. The challenge is ICBC has a limited number of approved contractors that they're willing to work with. And so it shrinks our pool down to 2 eligible companies. And that would be McElhenney Consulting and Watt Consulting. So we don't get the 3 that we want within our purchasing policy. It's not mandatory, it's not required. It's just that that's what we're going to seek every time we go out to get a quote. So it adheres to our purchasing policy, just within some constraints that were imposed by ICBC.
I would just add that the policy, the purchasing policy was adopted by resolution. So by resolution, council can vary the terms of that policy. So as long as there's a council resolution authorizing it, you're not deemed to be in conflict or in violation of the policy.
All right. I guess that's one question about, will the road sign, the signs, parking signs on Water Street be included? Because I think we just need to do the same thing we did with the handicap zone parking signs, is just turn them so they can be seen when you're driving, because very, very few people actually do the back end parking, and that was recommended through, I think, an ICBC study when we were looking at Water Street, is that it be back end parking going that way. But there's only 2 signs, and they're both, you have to be parked and looking at them to see them. So if they were just turned a little bit, but maybe if that's part of that study, maybe they can make a recommendation on how to make that more effective. Because it's very, very awkward. I know driving down that street, you've got a big vehicle with, you got a pickup that has bike racks on the back. And it sticks out just about to the, some of them almost to the center line, where the imaginary center line. So it's really not very easy to navigate. You're weaving down the road. And that was a comment. And now I'll read the recommendation. That the village enter into a cost-sharing agreement with ICBC for review of street signs and road markings as detailed in the staff report titled Review of Street Signs and Road Markings dated August 13, 2024, prepared by CAO Baker, and that staff develop a capital project proposal for development of a pavement management plan as detailed in the staff report of the same name. Moved by Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor Lang. Any further discussion?
Oh, sorry, I'm just jumping in, voting.
All those in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. And then now that council recess and reconvene in camera with the public excluded under sections 91E and K of the community charter to consider matters relating to land disposition and the proposed provision of a municipal service. Moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Leeswood. All those in favor? Motion is carried.